Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down 4 action-packed NFL playoff games from this past weekend. So, yeah, hopefully your team advanced. Hopefully those parlays cashed. Hopefully the guillotine squads are making it through. But regardless, we got some stuff to talk about and maybe, just maybe, learn a few things along the way. But joining me, as he does every single Monday on the Fantasy Life Show, we got Fantasy Life's finest, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. Dwain, how was your weekend of football, man?
It was a great weekend of football, man. It was cold in Texas. It got down. I say cold. It's not as cold as like what you guys deal with, but hey, it was in the 30s. So that was enough to, start a fire and just watch some football by the fire, Ian. Like that's a great way to enjoy a Saturday and a Sunday.
That does sound pretty fantastic, not going to lie. I had the pleasure of going to sunshiny, and by that I mean also very cold, Dayton, Ohio, hanging out with Chris Allen, Drew Davenport, and the boys at Buffalo Wild Wings, one of my favorite places to continue to frequent. That's not even an ad, people. I just honestly, God, I love beat-ups. Truly, Dwayne, can't express that enough. But again, guys, we'll get into these games right now. So yeah, presenting our instant recap. It's the utilization report presented by our fine friends over at DraftKings. And let's get right into it with the Chiefs taking down the Texans 23-14. Houston covers at plus 9.5. And I am really sorry for anyone that was betting on Chiefs minus 9.5 because really should have been an easy victory, easy-ish for them. But at the end of the game, decided to take a safety with their punter with just 11 seconds left to, again, get a pretty brutal, bad beat there for anyone on the wrong side. Under cash here at 41.5. And Dwayne, again, Chiefs get a 9-point win, but really, man, all the other factors that normally would go alongside with winning didn't exactly go in their favor. I mean, just 212 total yards for the Chiefs. The Texans had 336. No turnovers from either team. And so we ended up with this fun stat from ESPN Stats and Info. The Texans are now the first team to outgain their opponent by 100-plus yards, not turn the ball over, and lose. Previous playoff teams, 49-0, just another chapter of the typical Chiefs, death by 1,000 paper cuts experience.
Yeah, I wonder what that number would change to when you also isolate down the opposing team to having 0 turnovers. Like, obviously, there's still going to be a number there, but is it like 15-0? Doesn't sound as bad as like the 49-0. So it's one of those things where those kind of numbers are awesome, but like you immediately have a question about it.
Fair.
Both teams not turning the ball over was obviously a huge factor. I know the big storyline here was definitely Patrick Mahomes and, the late slides, the flop on the sideline that ultimately didn't get called, but was just an illustration of the problem that we have going on right now. And look, we all love Patrick Mahomes. He's an absolute baller. And to be honest, he's just trying to stretch the rules to the max, Ian. He's trying to do everything he can to win. So you can't necessarily blame him. I do understand why people are upset, though. But it's going to really come down to the league is going to have to change the rules in a way that's going to punish people like Patrick Mahomes for doing what he's doing. And if they don't, you can't blame them for continuing to do it, even if it means acting like you're going to slow up, gaining extra yards down the sideline. I know it puts defenders in a really, really bad spot. But at the same time, I do believe this is up to the NFL to fix, not for the Chiefs or Patrick Mahomes to fix it. Again, not saying I agree with it, but it is what it is right now. And look, the Chiefs are just playing mistake-free football, winning close games. I know this game ended up being a little bit larger margin of victory than what we thought it would for a game that played out the way it did. But ultimately, this one came down, I thought, Ian, to the offensive line play for the Texans. And one of your favorites, Dalton Schultz. I don't know how 3 times in the game they decided to isolate Dalton Schultz on George Karlaftis. One time they did get a little bit of help from, or at least Dare Ogunbowale tried to help Ian. But man, that was a recipe for absolute disaster. That resulted in 3 sacks alone. And you know how it goes, man. Sacks are almost like turnovers. Like they're not quite as bad because you don't give up the immediate field position, but they are drive killers. They stop your drive. They typically turn into a punt. Obviously, there were some special teams issues as well for the Texans with the kicker missing 2 field goals and an extra point. So that was also a factor.
Yeah, and I remember one of those sacks on fourth down where they were just late getting out of the huddle. Very crucial moment. They couldn't even just call a timeout there to maybe reset. And you ended up again with Schultz really just overmatched and out of position to begin with as well. So not good from Bobby Slowick and company over there in Houston. But also not so good, Dwayne, was that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. We did have Mahomes take 3 sacks in his own right. And as a team, the Chiefs were actually in the negative in terms of yards before contact per carry. So Kareem Hunt did, find his way into the end zone from short yardage, had 44 yards, but Pacheco still not getting much going. I mean, Dwayne, Mahomes was pressured on about 46% of his dropbacks out there. So if there was going to be, again, just a big time issue for the Buffalo Bills to exploit in Kansas City, it's probably that offensive line.
Probably. I just don't know that the Bills have the same personnel to do it like the Texans were able to do so often with just 4 players. The Bills have a good front, 4, but it's the Texans have had a really good front 4. Obviously, added Daniil Hunter in the offseason to go along with Will Anderson, who they took in the first round out of Alabama the year before. So they have 2 really good defensive ends that can generate a lot of pass rush on their own. And also, you've really had the maturation over the course of the season of the cornerback duo on the outside playing a lot better. I know early on in the year, we thought, Stingley is really a bigger fugazi in the league as far as people thinking he was one of the best, but did really come on towards the end of the year. Yeah. And as one of these guys that, has these natural ball skills, that you see, Ian. So I think that combination is always tough when you have good outside corner play and then you got 2 guys that can rush the passer. From if you're a Texans fan, that's the big thing you're hanging your hat on, is that like, hey, we have a really good coach in D'Amico Ryans. We've still got a young quarterback that hopefully the arrow's still pointed up. But man, the defense looked really good down the stretch, even though all the offensive weapons got hurt. So you're hoping if next year you can be healthier at the time of the playoffs and get into the race, that maybe you can have a little bit more luck. But as far as the Chiefs go, Ian, like, I think if you're trying to look for actionable things heading into the next round of playoffs, maybe you guys are thinking prop bets, or you're going to be playing some fantasy out in the streets, whether it's best ball, or you want to come on over to Guillotine for round 3, Ian. Round 3. Yeah. Round 1 and 2 have not gone good for me. Why not? I should go back for round 3. I mean, that's the only thing that we can do, right? But if you're looking at that, I think the big takeaway here, is Travis Kelce, man. Travis Kelce, if we look at him over his last 5 playoff games, Ian, so obviously only 1 this year, but he's right back into form. 22.1 fantasy points per game, 29% target share. If we look at the regular season over the last 2 years, 13.4 PPR points per game with a 22% target share. So Kelce doing just what he did last year, picking up and taking over the offense in the playoffs.
Actually picking up some yak out there as well. Certainly not moving fast. I don't think the next gen GPS speeds are out of this world or anything like that. But
13 miles per hour or something.
Yes, sounds about right. But I love the tweet from Brett Coleman. Obviously does fantastic stuff over in the YouTube streets. And he said that, Kelce's basically at the late career Jason Witten stage of his career, where he's just outslowing everybody, on the football field. So again, great stuff from Kelce. Obviously led the team with those 117 yards and a touchdown. And yeah, the touchdown was pretty sweet by Mahomes. I understand, Dwain mentioned it before. Some of those iffy penalties helped get him down there in the first place, but falling to the ground, I mean, you do remember from time to time, like, oh yeah, Mahomes can make some of these throws that truly pretty much nobody else can make, as much as we love to poke fun at that. So I agree with, everything you were saying with the officials and Mahomes really trying to push that boundary. I do wonder, Dwayne, because I've loved actually the replay assist feature they've had in the NFL this year. Like, we don't need to challenge everything. We don't need to take 5 minutes. Like, why can we not just apply that, though, when they clearly miss a call, like 2 Texans banging their heads, and calling the roughness on Mahomes? We don't need to make it challengeable, reviewable. I understand it was a, just disaster when they tried to make the pass interference calls brutal. But you know what? When a player clearly flops, let's overturn it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also okay with a ruling that if you think a player did flop, and I know that it will be tough to be objective, there's going to be some subjectivity to it, that you give them a penalty in the future. But I'm with you. Let's not slow down the game and make every single thing reviewable. Let's just do that quick instant replay. It did work well this year for multiple different things.
Otherwise, really didn't see much out of these Chiefs pass catchers. Xavier Worthy obviously was really on fire down the stretch of the regular season. 45 yards on just 6 targets today. Got tackled at the 1 yard line. I may or may not have had a Xavier Worthy first touchdown ticket. Wasn't exactly thrilled to see that go through, but certainly still being used in those underneath areas of the field, and even made a contested catch down the sideline. Dwayne, haven't seen those, sort of ball skills out of the rookie pretty much all season. And he was really, though, the only wide receiver to do much of anything. Goose eggs for both both DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown on 1 and 2 targets respectively. That said, Dwayne, we are starting to see the Chiefs finally kind of just cement Hollywood. Not finally, they were easing him in from the injury, I get it, but he really does now have a full-time role ahead of the AFC Championship.
Yeah, season high, 72% route participation. That was second on the team behind Xavier Worthy at 88%. You mentioned Worthy didn't come through in a huge way for you in fantasy with 8.7 fantasy points, but man, still 26% target share was locked in along with Kelsey as being the lead, one of the lead targets on the team. But it is Hollywood being the guy that's sneaking up. So we know Hollywood Brown has shown us in the past, Ian, that he can earn targets. Actually shown us just in these last few weeks. It didn't happen this week. And the 2 previous weeks, like his targets per route run were insane. So it just didn't come to fruition against the Texans. And remember what we just talked about, the outside cornerback play from the Texans. Hollywood Brown doesn't get the benefit of the motion, being in motion at the snap of the ball, lining up from the slot as much. DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy are getting most of that. And so that was just a situation where Mahomes is most likely just saying, I'm not even going to mess with those outside guys. I don't need to. I'll just stay inside, go to Kelsey, go to Worthy. But in a different matchup, as we move forward, and we know what we have with the Bills, we have a secondary that's good, but man, they don't have lockdown corners on the outside. I think you could see Hollywood take this 72% route participation. Maybe that goes up a little bit more. And it wouldn't surprise me, man, if he's the guy that leads the team in targets next weekend. And if they were to win, like over the next 2 weeks, like it's in the range of outcomes. It's a good player, almost back in a full-time role. So I really like Hollywood Brown in any sort of these playoff contests if you're trying to think about ways to potentially be different with the Chiefs.
Chiefs 1.5-point favorites at home ahead of that AFC Championship matchup against the Bills, 6:30 p.m. Eastern next Sunday. Get your popcorn ready for that one. I want to talk about, though, the losing team here just for a few minutes, the Houston Texans. Mentioned before, that offensive line really just being the primary culprit out here. 8 sacks for C.J. Stroud on the day. 56% pressure rate, Dwayne, per ESPN Stats and Info. That is their second highest mark in a playoff game since they began tracking the metric back in 2009. So Joe Mixon was able to actually get going on the ground. I mean, the run blocking wasn't horrible, 88 yards on 18 carries out there, but it's just a situation looking ahead to 2025. Look, we've seen enough elite play from CJ Stroud to, I guess, have a feeling that, yes, he can go out there and, hey, beat the Chargers. I mean, that was a great playoff win and everything, but man, Stephon Diggs, he's going to be a free agent. Tank Dell, looking like after that brutal injury, it could be a situation where he's not back until 2026. Like, Dwayne, if we are entering 2025 with the bulk of the same roster, are you buying a bounce back for Stroud? Because let's face it, man, QB 28 in fantasy points per game last year, man. It was rough more weeks than that.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to try to force that, right? With the way that we're going to handle our ranks in the off season, it would be something where honestly, it would have to work out early next season and he becomes a waiver wire target, unless they go make some big moves and add some different wide receivers or different weapons to the passing attack for this next season. That might change our minds a little bit. But even then, like coming into this year, we had Stephon Diggs plus Nico Collins and Tank Dell. And I know Dalton Schultz, we make fun of him, but like he's fine. Like if he's your fourth option, like that's doable, and then you have Mixon, who is pretty good also out of the backfield as a wide receiver. So even if we get that kind of upgrade, right, in the supporting cast, it's still going to be hard to try to squeeze CJ Stroud into the top 12. Again, we have so many options right now at the quarterback. Like we've got a young influx of talent at the position. Obviously, it's still top heavy. We've got 3 or 4 guys that are sitting at the top that really differentiate themselves. Then you got 2 or 3 really good like pocket passer type guys, and then you got a mix of everybody else below that. Like CJ Stroud, I could see himself working his way into that mix, but it would definitely take some upgrades on the offense. And again, even then, it would be hard to be confident.
I had my QB tiers and ranks go out last week on FantasyLife.com. We'll be talking about them a bit more in depth here next week. But yeah, I think you're spot on, man. There's a pretty clear-cut top 6 or so quarterbacks. But after that, it's one of those situations where I ended up with Stroud, I think QB 18 or so. But man, if you wanted to try to make the top 10 argument, you're talking about guys like Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, where yes, I do have all of them ranked ahead of Stroud. But again, maybe they can fix a few of those holes in the offseason, set him up for a better year too. Good news for Houston, again, you still got some of these feature cornerstones. Mentioned Will Anderson, who at this point, man, might need to start including him in that best edge rusher conversation alongside the TJ Watts and Myles Garrett's of the world. Again, sucks to see the season end, but it's going to be that way for all but one of the 32 NFL teams at the end of the day. So shout out Nico Collins, did have 81 yards in this one as well. Second most yards per route run to only Puka Nacua on the season. Certainly someone who's going to be in first rounds of most shapes and sizes here in 2025 fantasy fantasy drafts. So better luck next year, Houston Texans. Guys, we have another fantastic Saturday game to get to. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. Hey, football fans, there's only a few short weeks left in the season, and we've got some exciting championship games to look forward to now. You can get in on the action right now with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. They're offering all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly after betting just $5. Don't let this slip away. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. The Washington Fighting Matthew Berries took down the Lions, Dwain, 45-31. They were 8.5-point dogs coming into this one. Just went ahead and won by 2 touchdowns because sometimes destiny is on your side. Certainly seems like that's what Jayden Daniels and company are working with at this point. Over was cashed, though, easily, 55.5. I believe they pretty much had that one done at halftime. So Commanders will be traveling to Philly next week. The Eagles are 5.5-point favorites to start the week ahead of that one. But yeah, Dwain, I mean, it's really wild. All 4 losing teams this week actually outgained, the winning team, but turnovers, can be a hell of a drug sometimes. Unfortunately, that went against the Lions in a major way. 5 turnovers in this one. The Commanders, 0. So, I do agree that 4th down stops probably should count as turnovers. So we had some of those going on with Washington and Detroit as well. But, more than anything, just shout out Jayden Daniels, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Got a nice little screen to Terry McLaurin that he busted, and then Zach Ertz later also chipped in 51 rushing yards. And Dwayne, again, as I was going through the quarterback ranks, had Jayden Daniels QB3 right there with Josh Allen and, obviously Lamar Jackson at the top, but more so just trying to look ahead with Jayden Daniels, where we have the idea and most likely reality that Washington's going to do a good job adding some extra pass catchers, to this room, with all due respect to Diami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus. But the fact that he's doing what he's doing this year with a roster that's not even close to complete, I mean, if you wanted to rank him QB1 ahead next year, Dwayne, I couldn't really come up with a great argument. Why not?
Yeah, and we do this sort of thing, though, all the time. We said the same stuff about C.J. Stroud, and then look what happened, right? And these passers can regress the next year. Now, I'm not trying to, rain on the parade. Jayden Daniels has something going on for him that C.J. Stroud doesn't, which is how much he gets used in the run game, right? So he's essentially there on that Lamar Jackson level. So I think he's locked into the top tier of quarterbacks. If you wanted to rank him as high as number 1, you could. I don't see the reason why you would have to, just knowing that you've seen multiple years from Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, right? You've seen them over and over and over again prove they're worthy of that pick. So I think Jayden Daniels should be the number 3 quarterback. I think he belongs in that tier with those guys. But at the bottom, just because we've already seen it from them multiple times with different iterations of their roster. Now, as far as the playoffs go, man, looking at Jayden Daniels and what the Commanders are doing, Ian, 32% of the team's designed rushing attempts have gone through Jayden Daniels over these 2 playoff games. So they're really relying on him even more. Throughout the season, you'll see teams, 20% is really high for a quarterback design rush rate. And so you'll see these teams, they might do it in pockets of the season, but it's kind of like we still have to protect our guy. Now that it's in the playoffs and it's like, hey, every week could be our last week, they're truly just loading up Jayden Daniels with the additional rushing attempts. Now, most of the damage still, to your point, coming through the air. He looked tremendous. Also just hat tip to Cliff Kingsbury, man, a guy I know we've given a lot of hard time to. Man, he came out and he just totally thrashed Aaron Glenn's game plan. He knew Aaron Glenn was going to come out, run a lot of man coverage, run a lot of blitz stuff. Now, to Aaron Glenn's defense, man, everyone on the team is hurt. If you go look at the Lions roster, the way it started on defense this year, and you look at the way that it ended up, even the replacement players, many of them have been injured. And early on, they were getting pressure with 4 and 5 people. And as the season went on, they had to send more and more and more, Ian. And Jayden Daniels was just completely ready for that. He was dialed in. Hat tip to the offensive line for the Commanders. But what I saw was with Cliff Kingsbury clearly dictating and letting Jayden Daniels know when the blitz was coming, letting him know was it man or zone coverage with the different alignments. You saw that one play they kept using over and over where they would just have trips lined up all the way out to the sideline. And you would see they have the 2 guys down over it and the linebacker kind of stuck in no man's land. Jayden Daniels had easy reads on all these things, and also just getting the ball out lightning fast. If you look at the average time to throw over these last 2 games for the Lions, where they got after the 49ers and the Vikings, especially Sam Darnold average time to throw 3.21 seconds. Jayden Daniels, 2.64. So a game plan to clearly identify what the defense is doing and get it out quick Terry McLaurin, obviously one of those on that busted coverage, which was on that formation I was just now talking about, where you got the trips out wide to the left or right of the play, typically the left since it's Cliff Kingsbury. I'm just kidding, guys. But yeah, it was. I thought it was just a great game plan by the Commanders, and obviously executing Jayden Daniels. And you mentioned it, man. The Lions' turnovers killed them.
Just a 5.8 yard average target depth by Jayden Daniels. He obviously did uncork a few great deep balls. Diami Brown on the receiving end of at least one of those out there. But yeah, Cliff Kingsbury, man, certainly overcoming some of those late season concerns that we had earlier in his career. Kyler Murray, probably the one that deserves more slander these days. So great job by Cliff and Jayden Daniels. Also, these running backs, Dwayne, continuing to keep on keeping on. Brian Robinson, 77 yards and a pair of touchdowns on the ground. Austin Eckler only had 10 total touches, but wound up racking up 88 total yards. And now on the season, man, among 36 qualified running backs, Eckler is 6th in yards per carry and 1st in yards per reception. Yet another example, Dwayne, of, hey, some of these veteran running backs maybe coming off a down year, maybe had an injury that was a bit more to do with it than we gave him credit for, and then going to a new and improved offense and accordingly putting up big time numbers once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eckler's looked great since he's returned to the lineup. And it's really a three-way committee in the backfield right now. It's Jayden Daniels, as well as Brian Robinson Jr., and then Austin Eckler with a little dash of Jeremy McNichols still getting on the field a little bit too, Ian. So, but you mentioned it, Eckler primary handling those passing down roles, not as much of the rushing attempts, but as Brian Robinson taking that role as the banger between the tackles. Nice to see him be able to punch in a touchdown this weekend. It's been a pretty decent drought, here for Brian Robinson Jr. So you got three guys that you're trying to feed here. That's going to make it tough, like as far as you're trying to figure out how they're going to handle it. But I mean, I think the big takeaway for me in the rushing department is how much they're using Jayden Daniels. On the passing side, you mentioned Diami Brown. At the end of the year, it was really Olamide Zaccheaus that was the guy that we were looking at as the wide receiver 2 behind Terry McLaurin. But here in the playoffs, it has been Diami Brown. So essentially, that just tells you what Jayden Daniels is doing is like, hey, whichever guy you're trying to take away or however the scheme works out and the matchups are for the week, like he's going to find that next playmaker. And over the playoffs, it has been Diami Brown averaging 17.9 PPR points per game over these two contests. He has a 7.6 utilization score, Ian, with a 22% target share.
Just, again, they added Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round. A lot of us thought that he was maybe going to be one of these guys to get going. Hasn't done much of anything this year. Diami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, number 2, number 3 wide receiver on the NFC Championship game appearing, Washington Commanders out here. What a time to be alive. So playoff Diami now 187 yards and a touchdown over these last 2 weeks. Only had 308 yards and a touchdown across the entire regular season. So big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games, Dwayne. Great to see Brown get some of that done.
My apologies to the Zaccheaus family. I think it is actually pronounced Olamide or Olamide, but I just say Olamide because it sounds like something from like a Greek god. It sounds like, somebody who's just completely, just a badass. You can't tackle him, can't get him to the ground. So I'm just sticking with Olamide. It sounds like something that would be like in the movie Troy. So sorry, guys.
Yeah. We'll watch the film and get better. Good movie, Troy, by the way. Maybe a little heavy on some of the best scenes, but still enjoy that one. Lions, though, Dwayne, obviously, disappointed after this one, had the Super Bowl aspirations. You mentioned some of the defensive injuries, but honestly, you consider the pick six, you consider some of the other turnovers that gave, Washington a short field. You could be, just, I guess, well-intentioned to put more of the blame on the offense here. 5 turnovers, 4 of which were by Jared Goff, 3 picks and a fumble. Also had a hilariously bad, hilarious for everyone that wasn't Lions fans, interception by Jameson Williams in the 4th quarter. At that point, Lions were still only down 10 points. Guy ended up forcing it on a reverse pass. Washington went down and basically put the nail in the coffin after that one. So again, with Goff had the overthrow that led to a pick 6, had a post down the middle to J-Mo. Wasn't a perfect ball. I could understand why some people thought J-Mo should have, done a better job fighting for it, and then had kind of a desperation last drive interception as well. So one of those situations, Dwayne, similar to, I think, the Houston Texans performance, where not trying to say Goff, is without blame or anything like that. Maybe against some of those raw turnover totals, a little bit inflated. But, overall, got the touchdown to Sam Laporta, had Jahmyr Gibbs going off again. It sucks. If they play this game 10 times, I still think the Lions probably could have won a good 7 of them, but unfortunately did not win the one that mattered in this simulation that we live in.
Yeah, look, and if you played this game 10 times, I don't know that the Commanders win at 8. or 7 or 6. I mean, it might be 7 out of 10 to the Lions.
That's what I'm
just
saying,
the way
yeah.
this game played. Yeah, that's the way this game played out. The turnovers got out of hand. You got all the injuries. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. I think the Lions are going to be an absolute beast of a team again next year. And if their defense is able to stay healthy, I mean, watch out. The offense is going to move the ball. If the defense dominates like it did early in the year before all the injuries occurred, man. And honestly, they got better as the year went along. That's why Aaron Glenn's in all these conversations for a potential head coaching job, is what he was able to do with all the injuries. Did not work out in this game. And again, that really comes back to the game plan. Hat tip to the Commanders. And then Jayden Daniels just staying cool and collected, knowing exactly how to beat the defense that was coming at him. Aaron Glenn went with the blitz and you got burned. It just happens.
Current Super Bowl odds for not this year, but next year actually do have the Lions plus 850, only trailing the Bills, Chiefs, and Ravens. So I'm with you, man. I would probably pick them to make it out of the NFC ahead of next season. Certainly couldn't get there this year, but just even looking at their free agents, man, losing some of those defensive mercenaries, Marcus Davenport, Carlton Davis, but really do have the bulk of this team back in action. We'll see if they do have to end up replacing Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn. Certainly that would matter. But yeah, as I'm trying to go through again, some of these tiers articles I'm doing and looking at the Lions, there's not really too much to be overly concerned about other than the play callers leaving. But even in that case, man, you still have the bulk of the players there. You're probably going to get some promotion within running a similar system anyway. Really wouldn't be too concerned. But yes, certainly a devastating loss for the Lions ahead of an otherwise, great year. So shout out to our one true Sun God, 137 yards on 10 targets. Jameson Williams, while he did have that bad INT, did also have an electric 61-yard touchdown run. And then I just had Jahmyr Gibbs continuing to ball the freaking hell out. Dwain, 175 total yards and 2 touchdowns. His last 5 games now, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns, 154 yards and a touchdown, 163 yards and a touchdown, 170 and 4. And then again, mentioned that 175 and 2 performance here in the divisional round. So David Montgomery was back and doing his thing, had that cool trick play where he got a 20-yard completion on the pitch, shovel pass, great, great trick play, I should say, coming out of Ben Johnson's bag. But yeah, it really was impressive to see what Jahmyr Gibbs could do as the lead back down the stretch. So good stuff there from Mr. Gibbs. Now, guys, we do have some fun Sunday action to get to right after this quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. The NFL playoffs are here, and for some, it is game time, while for others, it is heartbreak. That said, guys, no matter how your season ended, Mike's Hard Lemonade is here to remind you that hard days deserve a hard lemonade.
Even if you score, always stay hungry. No matter how hard you football, it's easy to Sunday.
Speaking of Sunday, Dwayne, we had the Eagles take down the Rams 28-22 in a snowy affair over at Lincoln Financial. The Rams did cover +7, so shout out to them there. Over cash here of 43.5. So 2 turnovers by the Rams did them in, had both Matthew Stafford and Kyren Williams lose fumbles. Bit of a trend there for Mr. Kyren. Yeah, he has some other good parts of his game, but my God, dude, gotta wonder, man, maybe 6 or 7 more fumbles down the stretch, and Sean McVay could have considered making another move. But I digress. We will start things off with the Eagles. And once again, Dwayne really just wound up being the Saquon Barkley show. 205 yards and 2 scores on the ground. Also chipped in 27 receiving yards. I mean, he had 62 and 78-yard touchdown runs against the Rams on Sunday. In their previous matchup, he had 72 and 70-yard touchdown runs against the Rams. 3 runs, Dwayne, of 70-plus yards against the Rams. The rest of the NFL combined only had 7 this season. So it sure seems like if anyone could ever stop Saquon Barkley and really force the Eagles to actually become a more traditional drop-back passing team, they might be onto something. But good freaking luck stopping Saquon in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, but that has to be your focus. I think if you stop Saquon Barkley, you do beat the Eagles. I think the Commanders will beat the Eagles if they can stop Saquon. To your point, easier said than done. Like, it is easier said than done. I mean, because the Eagles still have these really good weapons. Ian, you've got A.J. Brown running out there. He's got a 27% target share in the postseason. So they're trying to get him the ball. It's just not working out. He's only turned that into 3 catches for 24 yards and 0 touchdowns. But any one of those completions can be AJB to the house. You got Devonta Smith on the other side. Dallas Goedert has really been the man that stepped up through the playoffs. He's been their top player as far as fantasy points go. He's got 12.2 PPR points per game. He's got a 7.0 utilization score. 27% target share for him. So tied right there with A.J. Brown. So they have the weapons, but really they haven't been able to get it going. And Barkley has been the guy to come through. And, man, they've just tightened things up, Ian. and just giving more and more of the workload to Barkley during the postseason. Some of this also Jalen Hurts' role in the run game going down a little bit due to some of the injuries, I think. But a 9.3 utilization score over these two games, 87% of the snaps, essentially not leaving the field at all, 75% of the rushing attempts. And this is a big one, 67% route participation. Kenneth Gainwell was getting a lot of that work during the regular season, not so much in the playoffs. They're like, nah, we're just going to keep Barkley out here on the passing downs as well. He's got a 16% target share over these two games in the playoffs. So Barkley on the field even more than the regular season, and obviously out there doing good things when you let him touch the ball. It was a pretty awesome replay when they went back and showed, his eyes basically glowing before that second long run. Like, do you see what I'm seeing? Like, just hand me this ball. This is about to be a house call. And it was. So Saquon, absolute beast.
It looked like I even saw a close-up of him telling Jalen Hurts right before a snap, like, I got this, or it was either that or watch this, which is, equally freaking sweet either way. So now 8 runs of 50-plus yards on the season. In second place, we have Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry with 3. So again, just such an incredible year from Saquon Barkley. And I'm sure we'll have some, oh my gosh, is the age cliff going to come? We're also going to have, Dwayne, the studies of people going, well, look what happened to every running back after the season. They had 2,000 yards, which again, the sample size is already freaking small. If you're fading Saquon Barkley for next season, you're literally just saying an injury that is not there right now is going to happen. Otherwise, I cannot figure out a single rational way to just try to get that point across, Dwayne.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think the big question here for the Eagles is just, Jalen Hurts. Like, if you're an Eagles fan, Ian, how confident are you right now? And I posted this on Twitter yesterday. I was kind of surprised. Obviously, you're going to get the Eagles fans coming in basically saying you're a complete moron, trying to take away our run game and see what happens in the pass game. And we already mentioned, like, it's a loaded team. The Eagles are absolutely freaking loaded. But Jalen Hurts, man, I mean, if we look at this, going back to week 12, 179 yards passing, 118 yards passing, 108 yard passing. Now, those were all wins against the Rams, Ravens, and Panthers. So not saying like that it wasn't working. Then you get a pretty big game against the Steelers, 290 yards, and then you get 131 yards in the first round of the playoffs against the Packers, and then yesterday, 128 yards. And my thing is, though, Ian, when I watch it, Jalen Hurts doesn't look good. I don't see a scenario playing out, at least in my head, where, hey, the only reason this happened is because we just decided we didn't want to throw the ball. We could have if we wanted. When Jalen Hurts is dropping back to throw the ball, he does not look good. He doesn't look comfortable. For having all the weapons that they have, their passing game is not in sync. I'm not putting it all on Jalen. There's something to do with the coordinator. There's something to do with everyone. But he does not look like the passer that we saw last year, even earlier in this season. So if I'm an Eagles fan, like, I'm pretty scared. If someone were to take away Saquon, like, I think we lose. I think they lose.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, man, where especially when you consider the threat Saquon brings, that offensive line, AJB, Devonta, and Dallas Goedert, and for the passing game to still have these struggles despite all those advantages, man, it really has been rough to see. So you could maybe chalk it up to the scheme, but I don't know, man. Like, I do wonder more and more when you have someone like Kellen Moore come to town, even some of the stuff that we've, I think you've rightfully had some good critiques of Zach Taylor, and some of the lack of, easy buttons he pushes in that Cincy offense. But I do wonder how much of it is really those play callers not doing that, or how much it could be the quarterback just not being comfortable with some of those other things. Because whatever it is for Hurts, I mean, even in past years, man, it's just been such a almost high school sort of offense. And guess what? The Eagles are such a freaking great team that it works. And you shouldn't overcomplicate things just to do it. They're in the freaking NFC Championship. But again, just wild to see this passing game not put up better numbers given all that aforementioned talent out there. So, we will have some situations where Hurts did not complete a pass on 15 plus yards downfield. That's also in large part because A.J. Brown dropped what probably should have been a 45-yard touchdown down the sideline. So not completely on Hurts each and every time out. But the other thing we now have to consider, Dwayne, I mean, he took 7 sacks out there, injured his leg in the second half, man, and now looks more immobile. We saw this down the stretch of last year, man. When you do have an immobile Jalen Hurts, that really is going to make things that much more tough.
He's not seeing the field well. It honestly looks like Sam Darnold, the double clutching, the holding it, the staring down the blitz, still getting
on
sacked.
That safety, get the ball out, man.
Yeah. I mean, you got, and he has a guy wide open on that play that honestly should probably be his first read. It's a slant route against man coverage blitz. So I don't know, man. It's a struggle watching it, and it's not just yesterday. Yesterday you mentioned it, 7 sacks on, you had 30 pass attempts. Like if we're going back, this has been a problem for a while now. We've got 3, 5, 2, 1, 2, 4, 3, 2, and 7 sacks over these last games that he's played. And we've already mentioned it, man. Some of these games, like he's not dropping back to pass hardly at all. So these are really high sack rates that he's taking. So not seeing the field well, not getting the ball out quickly, letting his playmakers do their thing. Again, I can't tell you all the reasons why. There are people that watch the film more that are smarter than me, but it's a problem.
He had a sweet 44-yard touchdown on the first drive, actually showed a bit more giddy up in the open field than I think we're used to seeing from him. So hopefully the injury, which he did continue to play through, and he was rolling out to his right and left, not necessarily saying he's going to be overly limited ahead of next week's matchup with the Commanders, but certainly not a situation that's going to overly help. So last thing I have with the Eagles, Dwayne, just more of a kind of bigger question about some of these passing metrics as a whole. The number one quarterback this year in completion percentage over expected is Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's right. You know what I'm saying? Having watched all these quarterbacks this year, like, do you think there's something about that metric? And it does a better job than raw completion percentage because we're trying to incorporate average target depth and, you know, some of the where you're throwing the ball in the field. But just from your experience, CPOE, do you think that is a stat that gets skewed a bit more by average target depth and maybe guys like Hurts who are throwing outside the numbers more often than they're throwing over the middle?
Yeah, the CPOE is trying to account for those things, but no metric is perfect. I think directionally it's good, but if you still got a player with a really low ADOT like what we've got with Jalen Hurts, it's still going to show up. It's still going to show up in the metrics. So really, you're trying to pair things together, right? You want to see the average depth of target, then you want to really think through the CPOE. And again, in a perfect world, average depth of target, it would all get accounted for by CPOE. Yeah. And again, it does help. To your point, it's better than raw completion percentage, but at the same time, it's not a perfect stat. So you still want to look at yards per attempt, and you want to look at the average depth of target down the field. Those things really do matter. And you mentioned the throws outside the numbers. Those are also harder. The throwing outside the numbers, your completion rate's going to go down versus inside the numbers. The further down the field, the more you're going to have incompletions than completions if you're trying to hit targets deep. So those things all definitely come into play. CPOE helps, but it's still not perfect.
A little trick for anyone out there trying to defend your favorite team, trying to defend your favorite player, and someone gives you, a damning stat that doesn't look good. Just say it's a team stat, because you can probably make that argument for every single stat that's ever existed. So good stuff on the Eagles. Again, we'll see them next Sunday, 5.5-point favorites there against the Commanders. Talking about the Rams, though, I mean, the fact they got as far as they did, really were knocking on the door of potentially winning this before some freaking horrible offensive line breakdowns down the stretch. Again, tough to see, but still a team that, hey, if they can keep this kind of core together, we'll see if they can make another run in 2025. Not sure that's a given, though. Remember, guys, Matthew Stafford did actually kind of re-engineer his contract before the season, making it more so of a, hey, we'll go through this year and then see what happens in 2025 and beyond. But obviously going out there, throwing for 324 yards and a pair of touchdowns in the snow against his secondary shows that when he is right and when he's got his weapons healthy, still can sling it with the best of them. Obviously, Puka Nacua, a big reason for that, had another 97 yards on 14 targets. Number one in the NFL in both yards and targets per route run on the season. And the targets per route run numbers are just asinine, Dwayne. I mean, we're talking about 37% of Puka's targets, of his routes, I should say, have resulted in a target. In second place is Malik Neighbors at 31%. So, I mean, hey, it's one of those things where if we can get 17 games out of Puka next year, hopefully with Stafford back, overall wide receiver one firmly within his range of outcomes.
Yeah, what's interesting about Puka when you really watch his game, like on most teams, he'd probably be like a 22 to 25% target share guy, which is still good. Like that's a really 25% is like borderline wide receiver one territory anyway. But then you put him in McVay's scheme, where you add in all the little looks around the line of scrimmage, all the motion, all the quick hits off the motion, and suddenly you got a player that explodes out, right, to where we are with Puka. And Malik Neighbors had that going for him as well. Early in the season, especially, they were using him. So typically when you see somebody with what you mentioned, for Puka on the season, 35% targets per route run, there's something like that going on. So I'm not trying to take away and say Puka's not good. He is. He's really good. But, man, being in McVay's scheme, that sends him over the top. He's going to be back as the lead target earner next year. Man, Cooper Kupp, Ian, over these last two games in the playoffs, 12% target share, 87% route participation. Now, out there most of the plays yesterday, 98% route participation. So it was nice to see him out on the field more. But, man, Tyler Higbee, really the guy that stepped up over these last few games, was getting healthy from that ACL tear that he suffered in the playoffs last season. He came on down the stretch. He was about to have a monster game in the wild card game before he got hurt. yesterday came out and was the second target earner on the team with a 23% target share. Not saying that we're predicting Tyler Higbee is going to be the second option on the team next year. We'll have to see all the moves the Rams make, but we have in the past seen Tyler Higbee come up with these flashes where he can give you, some fantasy production. Now, it hasn't worked out. I remember 2 years ago, before we really knew that Puka Nacua was going to be a big deal, it was like, okay, it's Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. How'd that work out? No, went to Puka Nacua. And it could be Jordan Whittington or something like that. But Tyler Higbee is a name, in my opinion, to remember for late in fantasy drafts next season. I think he's back on the sleeper radar, depending on what the Rams do in the offseason.
Him and Parkinson were the two receivers on the other end of Stafford's touchdown. So, again, certainly a passing game we'll want plenty of exposure to still in 2025 and beyond. Kyren Williams, though, could be a bit of an interesting one, Dwayne. He's obviously a good, you could even say very good starting NFL running back. But my God, man, only Ramondre Stevenson, more fumbles. For a guy that was lauded as a great receiver coming out of Notre Dame, it's just confusing, man, to not see them actually tap more into that. Really hasn't made the most of his, receptions or just target opportunities. Like, again, I think yards per route run, some of these metrics we use for wide receivers, they aren't quite as good for running backs when trying to, again, figure out who's the best. But I don't love seeing Kyren literally last in the metric, over the course of these past two seasons. So with Kyren, Dwayne, it wasn't, look, the whole punt return thing we make a joke about every single week. Like, I get it. Who cares if he's the punt returner or not out here? But I still maintain they didn't draft Blake Corum day 2 just to sit him on the bench, even though that's kind of what happened this season. I mean, how do you look at someone like Kyren, who, again, seemingly has his coach's trust, but a lot of the metrics are telling us he's not all that great? I mean, do we just accept it at this point and draft him in round 2 anyway next year?
Well, I think the big thing with the targets is they really try to get those targets in the same area of the field that you would normally be targeting your running back. Puka Nacua is getting those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of the deal is that they want to really get the wide receivers the extra touches. And I think also part of that is potentially workload management. You're going to load Kyren up in the rushing department. He is a back that's right around that 200-pound mark. So maybe they have something in their mind where, like, we really don't want to get him over like 20 touches per game. It's hard to know for sure what the driver is to all of it. But yeah, it has been a disappointment given what he did, what his collegiate profile said about him at Notre Dame. My guess is that Kyren Williams is actually probably still a really good back out of the backfield as far as being a receiver. It might be one of the better qualities in his game. It's just not the way it's played out because of the scheme that they like to deploy for the Rams. Now, to your other point here, I agree. When I look at Kyren, he is one of these guys that clearly McVay has trusted him to this point. McVay has also shown us multiple times in his career he is willing to just ride one back, and that has been Kyren over the last 2 seasons. We saw it with Todd Gurley, when he first got to L.A. We saw it with Cam Akers for brief stints. We saw it with Darrell Henderson for brief stints.
C.J. Anderson.
Yes. So we've seen him do we've never really seen for extended periods of time the Rams split up their backfield. So that, on one hand, makes it hard to say, well, if you fade Kyren, there's definitely some risk involved, especially if we have a quality quarterback back under center, which Stafford would qualify as. We'll see what they do in the offseason. But I do agree with the things you're talking about with Kyren, is that, like, he hasn't been like someone setting the world on fire with his opportunities as far as, like, efficiency goes. But we've talked about this. I've studied it in the offseason in the past. Like, these efficiency metrics, one, they don't really make a huge difference in fantasy. Yes, typically the top guys are very efficient, but it's not necessarily something you can use every year to say it's going to matter. And the other thing is we've seen is guys with low efficiency, that doesn't necessarily mean they're getting benched the next season by their head coach. You'll see a lot of these guys come back and get the full workload again. And what we've talked about is I think the coaches have they have things they're looking for, Ian, that don't fit into the counting stats that we're looking at. And it's a dependability factor. It's just that they know they can count on the guy to do all the jobs that a running back needs to do. And they literally think that running back is the best one to give him a chance and all those things, whether it's pass protection, whether it's sneaking out of the backfield as a pass receiver, whether it's handling those carries inside, the 5-yard line and in between the tackles, or whether it's, hey, we want to get somebody to the edge. For whatever reasons, there are certain guys that it just works out for them. And coaches are like, no, they can do all the jobs. And that is where we are right now with McVay, with Kyren.
Sure, it won't be the last time we break down Kyren's 2025 fantasy prognosis. But in the meantime, we will just simply wish the Rams, good luck on the rest of the offseason. So still got the game of the weekend to get to, everyone. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at New Era. Let me get a Jaguars hat on for this, Dwayne, because why not? You guys ready for the road to New Orleans with New Era Cap? Support the team you want to take home the Lombardi with the official cap of the NFL playoffs. Whether your team is a division winner, a conference winner, or a Super Bowl champion this year, New Era Cap has you covered with the official celebration caps that the pros wear. Prepare for champagne showers with the official cap of the NFL playoffs, available now at New Era Cap. I will be in New Orleans for a Super Bowl. Not going to the game, just probably going to Bourbon Street a bit more often than I should. So looking forward to that. Dwayne, though, also looking forward to breaking down again the game of the weekend. Bills took down the Ravens 27-25. Buffalo was a 1.5-point home dog going into this one. Over did wind up cashing just barely at 51.5. So Ravens 416 total yards, Bills 273. Also Ravens, though, 3 turnovers. Bills had 0. So obviously under the game, Lamar Jackson drives the Ravens down the field, defining drive, just incredible, be able to find the touchdown there at the end, got his guy Isaiah Likely, everything's looking great, and then Mark Andrews dropped a pretty freaking wide open 2-point conversion attempt after also having a fumble to set up, basically ruin another drive for the Ravens. So really sucked there to see that happen to Mark Andrews. Lamar didn't exactly help his cause with 2 first-half turnovers, was a bit of a slow start out of the gate for the Ravens. So yeah, that ended up being enough to swing the game in the Bills' favor, because on the Bills' offense, Dwayne, we saw some nice drives, particularly in the first half, but got a lot of help on that, pretty iffy, I would say, defensive pass interference call against Keon Coleman to help get them that 21-10 lead, I believe it was, going into halftime. Really wasn't a game where Josh Allen had to put his Superman cape on, just 127 passing yards, chipped into 2 short goal line rushing touchdowns, but man, just the fact, if you could have just gone in this game and the only thing you knew was that the Bills were going to only have 273 total yards on offense, you picked the Ravens 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, mistakes kill you in any football game. In the playoffs, they just become magnified. The Ravens had more mistakes. The Bills played a cleaner game. That led to the win, and there's something to that. And the Bills, it's interesting, right? Because you come out and you play against the Ravens, one of the best run defenses in the NFL, and the game plan, Ian, is to actually take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands and just run the ball. Now, Josh Allen obviously did his thing on the ground. He had the rushing touchdowns, but we had James Cook, we had Ray Davis, everybody involved, everybody playing well, a 39% drop back rate. You would think coming into the game that the Bills would be like, okay, this is a really good run defense. They were exposed earlier in the year. Pass defense has been better, but we're going to drop back. We're going to spread it out, and that's how we're going to win the game. And then you would also think that the Ravens, right, they're also probably thinking, man, that's what they're going to try to do. And it probably worked out perfect because it went the opposite. The Bills actually came out and said, no, we're going to run the ball. I think the Ravens were really ramped up to stop Josh Allen. And man, they just sprung a leak in the run game. So again, Bills only dropping back to throw 39% of the time, a minus 20% drop back rate over expectation in this game. But again, I give a hat tip, because they were able to come out and execute on this game plan they had. What's funny is Tony Romo was pretty much thinking what the rest of America's thinking at the end of the game is like, all right, probably got 3 possessions left. Josh Allen better touch the ball on 2 out of 3 plays every time. And as soon as they went to that with Josh Allen, the Ravens stopped them. And it was like the ground game was still working, and the Bills did go away from it. And it was actually the opposite of what Romo suggested. It went in a total different direction. The run game looked still good, passing game was not, but the Bills did pull out the win. It does come down to not making the mistakes. And man, I feel for Mark Andrews. I really do. Yeah. The fumble, it's tough. Almost anyone that gets the ball punched squarely in the middle, Ian, by a big defender like that, the ball's going to be coming out. It's not like he didn't have it. He wasn't dangling the ball. And then, man, just overthinking it. It's a big play moment, dropping that 2-point conversion. Ravens, man, to make it that close with their turnovers. Had they played a clean game, I think they win this game pretty handily.
Unfortunately, they did not. Ball security, job security for all you kids at home. 2 hands on it in traffic, but yes, it really was a great just individual effort by the Bills to get that ball out in the first place. So you said it, man, in terms of these running backs just having their way with the Ravens. James Cook, 67 yards on 17 carries, but Ray Davis and Ty Johnson combining for 60 yards on 9 carries. Hey, we got another game for the Bills. I'm sure James Cook is going to be the leader there, but I was surprised to not see Ray Davis almost earn a bigger share of the backfield as the year went on, because man, dude really has been making the most out of his opportunities all season long. So obviously with Josh Allen only throwing for 127 yards, didn't have too many fireworks going on in the wide receiver rooms. Khalil Shakur led the team with 67 yards on 7 targets. No one else he had even 15 receiving yards though. So sure, they're going to have to throw the ball a bit more often against the Chiefs here next Sunday. Again, going to be a fantastic matchup in that one, with the Chiefs currently sitting as 1.5 point home favorites. With the Ravens now, Dwayne, of course, we can't have a rational, discussion after this game. Lamar Jackson is now a fraud because, again, Mark Andrews kind of messed up there at the end. I know Lamar didn't exactly help his cause in the first half, and as much as playoff games are a small sample, that's the way it is. So if you do want to try to have these legacy-defining arguments and stuff, you do need to play your best when the lights are shining their brightest. But man, this was still, especially, man, the second half, the way Lamar kind of drove them back down the field there at the end, just goes to show you where, again, if you want to say Mahomes and Josh Allen are better than the guy and cite this playoff stuff, that's fine. Good freaking luck, though, naming more than 3 or 4 quarterbacks you'd rather have on your team.
Yeah, still, he's one of the best 4 quarterbacks in the league. Jayden Daniels now entering that conversation, right? And he's pushing his way into it. But if you're starting a franchise, like you're picking one of these 4 guys, and Lamar's on the list, man. He can change the destiny of your franchise. He just so happens that he plays in the AFC, where you got to go through Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen every year. That's tough on everybody, man. That is really tough. Jayden Daniels might be the guy really sitting really pretty, Ian, because if you look over the NFC, we don't have that level of quarterbacks. We have good teams that surround like decent quarterbacks with a lot of weapons, like Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff. Like there's different ways that you can get yourself to the Super Bowl or handle the way your passing attack works. But man, when you got to deal with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes every year, that's just really tough. And obviously that speaks to Patrick Mahomes, right, and his greatness as well. But I'm with you. I thought overall, the internet yesterday, like we'll just call it general terms, the internet did a pretty good job of not overreacting to that as much as in the past. But obviously, you're just going to have some folks that just can't help themselves with that sort of rhetoric, Ian.
Joe Burrow in that conversation as well. Chill out, Bengals fans.
Yes, I'm sorry. Joe Burrow in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, those really do.
I might take Burrow 1. Like, I love him.
Yeah,
so
he's pretty freaking fantastic. So hopefully, I had a good view of this game from his couch. Sorry, just had to throw that out there. But Derrick Henry, 84 yards and a touchdown on the ground, bulk of which in the second half. Mentioned Isaiah Likely's touchdown. Rashad Bateman also had one to, again, really cap what was an awesome bounce back season for him. We'll see again what this Ravens offense looks like ahead of next year. Anticipate them once again being pretty freaking good. Again, going to be a tough out for pretty much anyone across the course of a 60-minute football game. But that's going to do it for Dwayne and myself here on the Fantasy Life Show. But guys, it is award week. We'll be back with some shishis, some utilization stuff, and then the Berries crowning the fantasy MVP amongst many other awards here on Wednesday. So get excited for that one. And yeah, otherwise just have a great day. For Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for checking out the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody. And Rudy was offsides.